What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. We're going over my initial Week 3 rankings today, and it's going to be a long one. So sit back, hit the like button. Let's get things started off with Patriots at Jets on Thursday night. This game has a very low 38.5 point total. Jets 6.5 point home favorites for the Patriots. Jets are a very negative matchup for wide receivers, for quarterbacks, basically neutral for tight ends, slightly positive for running backs. The good news for New England is that their offense has basically been flowing through running backs and tight ends, not through wide receivers. So not as bad of a matchup as it could be for some other teams. You're not playing the wide receivers. You're not playing Jacoby Brissett. But Stevenson, high-end running back 2. Hunter Henry, high-end tight end 2. Stevenson in particular has the fourth most expected fantasy points among all running backs, behind only Devon Achane, Alvin Kamara, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Both are strong plays this week. Gibson, only other player you're really considering, but you're not considering that much. Had a big play last week, but he's only the running back 54 in the initial rankings, and so I would mostly leave him on the bench as a stash, just in case something happened to Stevenson. For the Jets, New England is a very negative matchup overall in the sense that they can really slow the game down, go run heavy, and we could really see limited plays overall. So they're negative for every position, but they're the worst for running backs and tight ends in particular. They do also have a shutdown corner in Christian Gonzalez, who mostly followed Metcalf last week. But as we saw with Metcalf last week, even when you have a really good corner, even when they're shadowing for most of the game, it does not mean they'll see them on 100% of plays. And so, like we saw with Metcalf, on the plays where Metcalf wasn't being guarded by Gonzalez, he goes off, he scores a long touchdown. So it can happen to where Garrett Wilson can have a very, very good game, even if Gonzalez is guarding him for 80% of the plays. Very middle matchup still for Garrett Wilson. You are still playing him. Overall, teams have also chosen to throw the ball at the highest rate in the league against New England. And so we'll see if that continues, but this could be a week where Garrett Wilson sees pretty heavy volume. Regardless, you are starting Breece Hall. You are starting Garrett Wilson. You are benching everyone else. Braylon Allen is an elite handcuff. Mike Williams got a lot more snaps last week. Hopefully soon the volume will come with more snaps as well, but still high upside bench play there. And then Conklin, I think we'll see better days, but probably not this week. Sunday games kick off with Bears at Colts, 43.5 point total. Colts 1.5 point home favorites. For the Bears, the Colts are a negative matchup for wide receivers and tight ends, a slightly positive matchup for quarterbacks, and a great matchup for running backs. Specifically for running backs, this matchup is great for rushing volume and accounts for a 35 rushing yard boost to your average running back production. Swift hasn't been great so far, but had the Colts as the second best matchup for running backs in fantasy. So if there was ever a spot where you were going to start DeAndre Swift, it is here against the Colts in a dome game. If you're not playing him this week, you're probably never going to play him. So maybe look to move him if you're not going to go to him this week. Aside from Swift, it depends a little bit on Keenan Allen. I don't think he's going to play, but I guess later in the week, maybe he could kind of come back, be full. But I feel like things are trending towards him not playing. If I do project him in, then DJ Moore is wide receiver 2. He's kind of like a flex play. And Odunze is more of a high upside bench option. Maybe like if you're in a 3 wide receiver league, a flex option. But for the most part, you probably wouldn't need to play Odunze. If Allen misses, which again, I think is going to happen, you're definitely starting DJ Moore. Odunze kind of shifts up to kind of a lower end flex play, but someone who definitely has a higher ceiling, has a better potential outcome there. And, another week removed from his injury, I would expect him to be healthier and to produce better than last week. Aside from that, Caleb is okay. I'll talk about streaming options in a little bit later in the video, kind of how I would rank them. He's okay as a streaming option, but you don't have to go there, and you're definitely benching their tight ends because they're rotating in too much, and neither one has a great target share. Then for the Colts, Bears are a pretty neutral matchup for running backs, a poor matchup for all other positions. You're starting Anthony Richardson. You're starting Jonathan Taylor as quarterback and running back ones. Then Pittman, he grades out as a low end 2 this week, more of a flex play. Gonna depend a little bit on Downs. It seems like Downs is gonna play this week, which is basically just gonna take everyone's target share and shift it down a little bit. But I think will elevate the offense as well. They've really struggled so far to consistently get drives done. They're scoring when they hit on big plays, right? And they've had a number of big plays this season, and this sets up as a matchup where they can get big plays. So that's still a factor on this offense. But having Downs in there as a very consistent chain mover, someone that can get them out of a jam on third downs, yes, it will limit the target share of everyone. But if we can just stay on the field a little bit longer, run more plays, score more points, that's going to benefit the offense as a whole. So I know Pittman hasn't been great, but he's not going to average a 46% catch rate all season. Wouldn't be shocked if, adding Downs, getting this offense a little bit better, maybe he starts to get it going in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I mean, if we look at volume for the running backs and receivers on the Colts, no team in the NFL is averaging fewer expected fantasy points at the running back position or the quarterback position. Like both of them, they are dead last in the NFL behind the Panthers. Now, a lot of that has been fluky, right? They ran a laughably low 43 total plays in week 1, only 53 last week. The Bears defense is very, very good, but they've allowed the 6th highest explosive play rate. Teams throw on them at the 3rd highest rate. Their offense both plays fast and throws at a high rate, so that can elevate plays. So this is a potential game where you can finally get 60 plus plays from the Colts. And again, if Downs returning kind of helps out the offense, maybe we get back to the Colts offense we figured we'd see this season. So again, not necessarily a true bounce back spot because the Bears have a really good defense, right? They're not playing the Commanders right now, but this is a game where I think things can look better. Again, you're starting a core of Richardson, JT, and I think Pittman as well. And I think you're still benching Downs, definitely in his first game back because we don't know what the snap share is going to be. Benching Pierce, benching A.D. Mitchell, but you're hoping that the offense looks better this week. Next up, we've got the Giants at the Browns, a very low 38.5 point total. Browns 6-point home favorites. For the Giants, Browns are a positive matchup for tight ends, slightly negative for running backs, negative for quarterbacks and wide receivers. They shut down wide receivers really, really well and basically just force teams to beat them with tight ends and running backs. No team has a lower projected point total than the Giants this week, so we're not exactly looking to secondary players on this team. Malik Neighbors must start every week, but behind him, I mean, maybe you can look at Singletary. He's running back 29 right now. Fine. Other than that, honestly, and even including Singletary, Neighbors is really the only Giants player I would want to be starting this week. For the Browns, the Giants are a very positive matchup for wide receivers, a +1 for running backs, a neutral 1 for tight ends, and slightly negative for quarterbacks. Unfortunately, the Browns went to a much larger running back by committee last week. And so what we thought entering the season was that before Chubb returns, Ford was going to have a really, really strong role in offense. That happened in week 1. It did not happen in week 2. They went to much more of a committee between Ford and Foreman. Tough to know if there was some underlying factor there, if something's going to change. But right now I have Ford as a running back 26, Foreman as a running back 33. And while I would love to use one of them as, close to a touchdown home favorite against a beatable defense, I don't have a lot of faith if they're going to split like they did last week. Then for the wide receivers, the usage hasn't been amazing. And this is a spot where we do think they would lean a little bit pass heavy. But, none of their wide receivers are getting top 20 usage. None of them stand out as really good plays. I think Amari Cooper is startable. And I think that if you were sitting there, given how you drafted, maybe you've got 3 kind of core wide receivers. And after that, you're not in love with your secondary options. He's not going to project well, but part of that is because he only has 5 receptions for 27 yards on 17 targets. He's not going to have 1.6 yards per target, a 26% catch rate this season. So he's going to have better games moving forward. I just cannot think they're going to be this bad on offense. Personally, though, I would prefer, if you do have someone else that projects at least similarly or likely projects better. Like, he's not going to project well in any format, any projection system this week. If you've got someone else, I'd feel okay benching him just until we see some sort of life out of Deshaun Watson. Like, I don't trust the Browns at all while Watson's quarterback right now. Please, can we get some Jameis Winston at quarterback? Next up, we've got the Packers at the Titans, even lower, 37.5 point total. Titans 2.5 point home favorites, which is honestly pretty wild to see because Jordan Love is practicing. I don't know if he's going to play. He doesn't know if he's going to play yet, but I mean, there's no way if Love actually plays that the Titans should be favorites. And if there's a chance, I don't know, 2.5 just feels weird to be for the Titans. Anyways, for the Packers, all depends on Love, right? Of course, we're going to project this team very, very differently if Love is starting versus if Willis is starting. Titans are a mostly neutral matchup all around. But again, the biggest factor here is who is the starting quarterback. Malik Willis, if he's getting the start, Jacobs is a really good play. Jaden Reed could be used in the flex. But other than that, really, you wouldn't want to be going to their secondary players. If Love starts, you're definitely playing Jacobs. Reed gets bumped up to a pretty strong play, and I would play him. And then Dobbs does enter the conversation as a solid flex play. Remember, Dobbs is the one that is out there every snap, running the most routes. The hesitation with Watson and Wicks is that they're in the same role, just rotating. So each of them is basically playing like half what you would want them to play. So individually, if one of them had that role, they'd be great, and then we'd want to start them, but not if they're going to rotate. So I don't really want to play Wicks or Watson right now, just until there's an injury or one of them takes over. But again, Dobbs benefits a little bit more from having a good quarterback, whereas Reed can get more manufactured touches. And so it doesn't matter as much who the quarterback is for Reed, but it matters a lot more for Dobbs. So if Love is starting, Dobbs would be a pretty strong play. Oh, and for the tight ends, I like them as players, but until one of them gets hurt, really, you can't trust either one of them. Then for the Titans, Spears has an ankle injury. He said he's going to play, so we will see if that ends up coming true. Regardless, though, I wouldn't play him. He has the ankle injury. The usage has been down until he's 100% guaranteed. Like, you just can't be starting him. Pollard is a really strong start. I would say that Ridley is a very strong start. Other than that, you really don't need to go to any other players. Like, no one else other than Pollard and Ridley is averaging more than 7.3 expected points per game. That is not good. Like, so much of the volume is flowing through those two players. The Packers are a slightly positive matchup for all positions, but if the volume isn't there, it doesn't really matter what the matchup is. So other than Pollard and Ridley, I wouldn't play any players on the Titans. And Pollard does stand out. Like, with this Spears injury, like, he's going to have a pretty strong role, and he already had a strong role before. I would play Tony Pollard this week. Next up, we've got the Eagles at the Saints. Pretty high, 49.5 point total. Saints actually 2.5 point home favorites. You would not have predicted that to start the season. For the Eagles, A.J. Brown is expected to miss another week, and so we're going to get a ton of volume on Devonta Smith, Saquon Barkley, and Dallas Goedert. We should expect the Saints to continue finding success on the other side. And so I'm anticipating a potentially trying game script, but at least one that forces the Eagles to be aggressive, right? I don't think the Eagles are going to get up by multiple scores, sit on a lead here. I think the most likely outcome is that the Saints get up, that the Eagles have to kind of come back from that. Given the injury, given how much volume we're expecting on their core, Hurts, Smith, Barkley, Goddard, all should be locked into starting lineups, all should be playing, and I would not go to secondary players on this team. Then for the Saints side, their transformation has been just incredible to watch. Like, this line is holding up great given the protections that they're running. They're using motion, they're using play action, they're using creative ways to gain explosive plays in a number of different ways, not even from one player, from 3 different players. Like, it is awesome. We can't go to secondary players here either, just given how the offense is set up. But for the time being, you are starting Kamara, you are starting Olave, you are starting Shaheed every single week. Until they stop dropping nukes, I would probably just start Derek Carr as well. It's difficult to project him as a top 10 quarterback because the efficiency is so high, and you truly just can't project the efficiency that they're running on right now. Like, even if you think they're going to remain good, they're not going to remain that good. They're not going to average 45.5 points a game. They're not going to have, these insane catch rates, this insane efficiency on offense, but they're going to be good. And so I would keep streaming him if you have been doing so. And if you picked him up the stream, again, I continue doing that this week. Chargers at Steelers is up next. Extremely low. 35.5 point total. Steelers 1.5 point home favorites. For the Chargers, depends on the status of Herbert. Vibes seem good early in the week. Hopefully he's able to play, but we have to figure that part out. If he does play, Dobbins, kind of a mid to low end running back too. Ladd, Quentin Johnston. Their flex plays. Gus, probably someone I would keep on the bench. I know Dobbins has been an awesome player to start the year, but he's also only averaging 13.5 carries per game. He has a grand total of 4 receiving yards on the season. He's not going to average 10 yards per carry all season. If you believe that he's going to continue being efficient, I think it's totally fine to start, right? A mid to low end running back too is someone you are starting. And if you've been riding it, keep riding it, right? But don't expect 10 yards per carry all season. The wide receivers, like I said before, they're fine, but I have Pittsburgh graded out as the 4th worst matchup for wide receivers. And so if you can go in a different direction, I probably would. I know Quentin Johnston has looked better this season, but it's not like he's looked amazing. And they do have a really good corner that's probably going to shut him down. So if anything, I'd go with Ladd. Even then, you probably have a better option than Ladd or Quentin this week. Then for the Steelers, Chargers are a positive matchup for wide receivers, a neutral one for quarterbacks, a negative one for running backs and tight ends. I don't think Arthur Smith cares about matchup though, and so don't expect them to change anything offensively no matter who they are playing. Pickens has been amazing to start the season, but the volume is just so low with Fields and Arthur Smith. That combination is not going to lead to a lot of passing yards. He could legitimately be, Pickens here, a top 5, top 7 wide receiver on like a lot of different teams in the NFL, but I can only rank him as a low-end wide receiver 2, even given the matchup being good this week. Behind him, Najee grades out pretty good as like a mid to low-end running back 2 or a flex play maybe. Arthur Smith really, really likes him, and so while I do believe, and we saw it play out last week, that Jaylen Warren is going to increase in snaps, increase in volume as he gets healthier, I think there's still a cap to that. Like I think Najee is the one you want in fantasy because Arthur Smith really likes him, and because there's really no passing game here. So even if we thought, well, Warren's going to be the one that has more receptions, more work in the passing game, there is no passing game in Pittsburgh, and so both of them I think will kind of like end the season as like flex plays. But at least right now, I feel like if you've been riding Najee, keep riding him this week. Oh, and then Fields is fine to stream, but the ceiling is pretty low. Pat Freiermuth, fine to stream, ceiling is pretty low. Anyone who relies on passing on this team does not have a ceiling. If they are not going to throw the ball, it's going to be difficult. Like Justin Fields will have to have 100 rushing yards because he's only going to throw for like $150 at best. Texans at Vikings is up next. This game has a 46 point total. Texans are 2.5 point road favorites. For the Texans, the Vikings are a positive matchup for wide receivers and a slightly negative one for all other positions. Nico's a must start. Tank, Diggs, they're good flex plays. Neither one of them has been all that great to start the season, but this is a good spot for them to get going. And Tank in particular, he just missed on what could have been a very long touchdown last week. He still is 16th in expected points per game among wide receivers. Nico is for sure their most valuable wide receiver, but I think better days are coming for Tank and Diggs. For running backs, it depends on Mixon. I'm not sure yet if he's going to play. We haven't really heard any news there. If he does play him. If he's out, then one of Akers or Pierce is going to draw the start. It depends on the health status of Pierce. If both of them are active, honestly, I feel like they would split and neither one would be all that appealing. But if Pierce remains out and we get Akers starting with Pierce and Mixon not playing, then Akers would actually project pretty well. He would be someone you could use in that running back 2 spot. So just kind of keep an eye on that situation. After them, always start Stroud, and then the tight ends, they don't get enough usage to be considered. On the Vikings side, seems like Jefferson's going to play. Obviously, confirm that, but if he plays, play him. Seems like Aaron Jones is going to play as well. Confirm that one too. Jones obviously is not the must start that Jefferson is, but assuming that he plays, assuming that both of them are out there, I think Jones is totally fine to play in the flex. Addison is apparently trying to play. It's going to be close. If that's the case and he's out there, I wouldn't trust him until he goes, plays a game, finishes with a decent snap share, looks solid. I would just keep him on the bench. It's pretty risky throwing him out there on his first game back because you don't know. And maybe he only plays 40% of snaps. Maybe he's rusty. Maybe he's a decoy. Like, there's a lot of outcomes there where he ends up with like 1 for 10 and you're like, why did I waste a spot on Addison? So wait until he's 100%, or not 100%, but wait until he's like 80%. He's out there and you actually trust him a little bit to start him. If Addison does not play, again, like I said last week, you can go to Naylor, you can go to some of these other wide receivers, but for the most part, Jefferson, Aaron Jones, maybe Ty Chandler if you were super desperate, but we're not even at bye weeks yet. I don't think you need to play Ty Chandler. And then Sam Darnold grades out pretty well. He doesn't have a super high ceiling, but, and again, assuming Jefferson plays. If Jefferson plays, you're not playing Sam Darnold. But assuming Jefferson is out there, there are worse plays to stream than Sam Darnold. As things stand right now as of recording, the streaming options and the projections, how I have them ranked is Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, Brock Purdy, Derek Carr, Jared Goff, Caleb Williams, and Baker Mayfield. That is probably going to shift around as the week goes on, as I finalize the projections. But as things stand right now, that's where I have it. Final 1 o'clock game is going to be Broncos at Bucs, 40-point total, Bucs 6.5-point home favorites. For the Broncos, it's a negative matchup for the wide receivers, a neutral one for all other positions. Given how poor this offense has been, you really only have Sutton as a flex play, maybe Javonte Williams as like a low-end running back too. But aside from that, this is not a team that we want to be taking players from right now. I do think Bo Nix could be good long-term. Maybe in the second half of the season, we get some usable pieces from this team. But as for right now, for the most part, I would just avoid the Broncos. Then for the Bucs, Baker's been great to start the season. If you've been streaming him, you want to stick with him, definitely fine doing that. Godwin, Evans, they have the toughest matchups on the team, but both are seeing top 20 wide receiver usage. Both should be in starting lineups every week. Rachaad White is being outplayed by Bucky Irving on the ground, and basically exactly what we feared entering the season is coming true. Irving is taking work on the ground. White has remained inefficient, and that's really hurt his fantasy numbers. He is still startable as a low-end running back too, but is far less valuable than people thought he would be to start the year. 4 o'clock games kick off with Panthers at Raiders, 41-point total. Raiders 4.5-point home favorites. For the Panthers, they are starting Andy Dalton this week, which should breathe some life into this offense. Dalton made a spot start in week 3 last season, coincidentally, ends with 34 of 58 passing, 361 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Adam Thielen had 11 for 145 and a touchdown. Chark, 4 for 86 and a touchdown. Even Terrace Marshall caught 5 receptions. It was the best game of the year for Thielen, second best game of the year for Chark and Marshall. I'm not expecting another 350 plus passing yards from Dalton this week, but I wouldn't be shocked if all of the Panthers players looked a little better this week. I don't think you're playing any of them because there's still the risk that Dalton does nothing, but Hubbard is my running back 31, Deontay's wide receiver 42, Leggett wide receiver 52, and I haven't even really fully factored in the upgrade from Young to Dalton yet. I factored in a little bit, but there's going to be more later in the week when I kind of go through that like second look at the projections. More of that is going to increase. So I would expect all of them to bump up a little bit. Do with that what you will. I didn't list off anything there that you definitely have to start, but if you did like need to start a Panthers player this week, it would be the time to do it in a game where the opponent is throwing the ball at a pretty high rate, so we could get some plays on the Panthers side. And again, Dalton is going to be better than Bryce Young has been. Then for the Raiders, it's a great spot for Zamir White. It's a bad spot for Minshew and the wide receivers. Neutral one for Bowers. Bowers has been playing out of his mind, though, and I was definitely too low on him this summer. He is projecting as my tight end 2 this week, and he is a must-start every week going forward. As for everyone else, I think you're starting Adams despite the poor matchup. If you're in a bind, you can play Zamir. People are going to be excited to start Zamir because we've seen incredible numbers from running backs against the Panthers. The issue with him is basically that he needs to score. He's not going to be super involved in the receiving game. He also does need them to be winning because they will use Madison if they are losing. I think I'd have a ton of confidence in the play if Bryce Young was the starting quarterback. With Dalton, I have a little bit less confidence that the Raiders will pull ahead for a large portion of the game. With that being said, Zamir projects amazingly. I mean, this Panthers defense can't stop anything on the ground, and so he projects really well. If you've got him, if it's a fringe option, I would probably play him this week. He projects, honestly, I think right now he's like the running back 13. I could see that bump back a little bit, but if he's projecting he's a high end too, like it's another thing with like Swift. It's like, well, if you're not going to play Zamir White when he's playing the Panthers at home as a favorite, when are you going to play Zamir White? Dolphins at Seahawks is up next. 41.5 point total. Seahawks 4.5 point home favorites. For the Dolphins, Seattle's a plus matchup for running backs, for tight ends, slightly negative for wide receivers, poor one for quarterbacks. With backup quarterback play, you're still starting Tyreek Hill. Obviously, the chances of him hitting his ceiling are a little bit lower. The actual ceiling is lower as well. But you're starting him. You're starting Devon Achane. Waddle, pretty solid flex play. Mostert, if he's active, an okay low-end flex play if he's able to go. But aside from that, I mean, for the most part, you got to stay away from the Dolphins players if they're not Tyreek Hill, they're not Devon Achane, and they don't have Tua at quarterback. The Seahawks, they're letting Geno cook, and they said they're going to be cautious with Ken Walker, which to me, I don't think he's going to play this week. That makes Geno a great streaming option. Metcalf, JSN, they're going to grade out great. You should be starting them. Lockett, upside flex play. If you had to, you can go there. Even Fant, honestly, like he's running a ton of routes. He's out there a lot. He's not getting a ton of production, but if you needed a sleeper tight end play this week, he would be a somewhat decent option. At running back, it really just comes down to Ken Walker. If Ken Walker plays, play him. If Ken Walker is out, play Charbonnet. It's really that simple for Seattle. Next up, we have the Lions at the Cardinals. This game has an extremely high 51.5 point total. Lions 3-point road favorites. For the Lions, as with every week, start their core. Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, they are must starts. Jameson Williams is a very strong start. David Montgomery is a low-end running back too, a little bit touchdown dependent there. And then Goff is a great streaming option. The Cardinals offense has really been clicking, and this game has a massive ceiling overall. The touchdown potential for all these players is really, really strong, so I would get all of them in your starting lineup. Then for the Cardinals, Kyler, McBride, Connor, Marvin Harrison Jr., all must starts this week. Dortch, low-end flex play if you needed to because of an injury. He doesn't have a massive role, but the Lions are the second best matchup for wide receivers, and if this game is going to shoot out, he could get plenty of looks. I would absolutely start their top 4, though, and then maybe Dortch after that. 49ers at Rams up next, 44.5 point total. 49ers, 7.5 point road favorites, thanks to key injuries on the Rams side. Kind of crazy. I mean, for the 49ers, like, pretty wild that they are 7.5 point road favorites in a divisional game, which are usually closer scoring games, when you don't have McCaffrey and you don't have Deebo Samuel. That is the state of the Rams offense, though, right now. It kind of speaks to how well coached the 49ers are, how deep they are as a team. Rams, poor matchup for running backs, neutral one for tight ends, slightly positive one for quarterbacks, and are the 4th best matchup for wide receivers. With no Deebo, this is the eruption spot of all eruption spots for Brandon Ayuk. He is an obvious must-play, a clear top 5 wide receiver. They'll also focus a little bit more on Mason, on Kittle, so even though you were already starting them before, I'll reiterate, they are good plays. You should be starting them as well. Purdy, totally fine to stream, but I always hate using him just because he truly never hits a ceiling. He has no actual ceiling. He projects fine, though. If you need someone who's going to put up roughly high-end quarterback 2 numbers, he's a good option. Fringe option this week is Juwan Jennings. He's fine. I think they will use Jacob Cowing just a little bit this week. The rookie, I think, to use in some sort of way like Deebo Samuel, obviously to a much lesser extent. But they'll also kind of just hyper-focus on the top 3. I think Jennings gains value. I think he is fine. He is definitely not a must-start. On the Rams side, Kyron is an obvious start, but no one really stands out. As of right now, I have Demarcus Robinson as a wide receiver 35, Tyler Johnson as a wide receiver 37, Tutu as a wide receiver 46, and then Jordan Whittington as a wide receiver 49, and then Coley Parkinson's my 10 and 14, so he's totally fine to stream. But yeah, I mean, it really comes down to what you have if you are starting any of these guys. Odds are you do have at least 3 top 35 wide receivers, and if you do, roll with them. I again want to reiterate that I am excited to see Jordan Whittington in a more expanded role. I really hope they do use him more because I think he could be a sneaky player for us to be on early. Final 4 o'clock game is going to be Ravens at Cowboys, 48.5 point total. Ravens 1 point road favorites. For the Ravens, Flowers has the highest share of a team's expected fantasy points among wide receivers, currently has the 6th most overall expected fantasy points at the position. It's a poor matchup for or against Dallas, but he's a player that we know is going to play really well in domes. Huge share of the offense, huge share overall. I would absolutely be starting him this week. I know Baltimore has been worse than expected this season on offense, but I would keep rolling with their top players. Even a tough matchup. You're starting Lamar, Flowers, Henry, and Andrews, with likely being okay as like a low-end 1, high-end tight end 2, especially if you think Dallas wins, you think Dallas gets up by 7, 10 points at some point, forces Baltimore to be pass heavy. That's the script where obviously likely would be much better. Then for the Cowboys, this is a very negative matchup for everyone but the tight ends. You're obviously starting CeeDee Lamb, but Dak does not project well. Cooks, Rico, Zeke, they're all pretty low-end plays this week. And while Schoonmaker, I don't know how to say his name, he had an okay game last week. He had 6 receptions, 43 yards. It came on 15 routes. Like, he wasn't actually out there running very many routes. I would not trust 15 routes this week for him. Again, I would be fine using Cooks or one of the running backs since Dallas is home. They always play better at home. But honestly, it'd be Lamb. I would just be Lamb for me, and I really wouldn't go to any other Dallas players. Sunday night game is going to be Chiefs at Falcons, 46.5 point total. Chiefs just 3.5 point road favorites. That feels a little bit low. For the Chiefs, Pacheco is going to miss some time, and so they're going to be rolling with Steele, Pirine, and maybe Kareem Hunt. I don't know if he's going to be ready with like less than a week with the team, but he's a vet, so it's definitely possible. As of right now, I have the rankings: Steele, running back, 29, Pirine, 34, Kareem Hunt, 57. That could change depending on news, but again, that's to start the week where we're kind of at there. Mahomes, Rice, Kelsey, all must starts. Worthy, high ceiling flex play, and then the running backs I kind of listed before. Depends what you have if you need one of them, but I think I'd be okay if you were in a bind and you needed Steele as a running back too. I think I'd be okay playing him, but again, that's going to totally depend on the news we get later in the week, so I'll keep adjusting the rankings. You can check those. With no Pacheco, though, I also expect them to lean a little bit more pass heavy, so that's kind of a boost to Rashee Rice, to Travis Kelce, but especially Rice. I feel like it's a really good spot for Rashee Rice. How exactly they look without him, though, remains to be seen. On the Atlanta side, KC is an awful matchup for wide receivers, a poor one for running back, and a +1 for tight ends. Bijan, Pitts, they are must starts, but Cousins grades out really poorly. London is only my wide receiver 37. I do have faith in this passing offense long term, but this is not the week I really expect them to turn things around. If you have another option and you can go with someone other than Drake London, I might be going back to benching him this week. Wasn't a great play in week 1, much better play last week, but this week it's going kind of back to week 1. I don't expect a lot of production there. The first of 2 Monday night games is going to be Jaguars at Bills, 46.5 point total. Bills 5 point home favorites. For the Jaguars, Buffalo is never an ideal place to play, especially if you're potentially going to be down your starting tight end and a very important player on your offense. Buffalo is a neutral matchup for tight ends, a pretty poor one for everyone else. Honestly, no one grades out very well, but Etienne is fine to use as a running back 2. Engram, if he plays, is fine as a low-end tight end 1. Other than that, I think you're just benching all Jaguars players this weekend. For the Bills, Josh Allen, James Cook, their must starts. Kincaid is again my tight end 10 right now. Shakir comes in as a wide receiver 31. Coleman, wide receiver 61. Samuel, wide receiver 75. It's a good offense, but they only have 2 players averaging more than 7.2 expected points per game. Josh Allen, James Cook. Everyone else is at 7.11 or lower. That's not very good, right? That's not enough volume for us to be trusting. Again, I think Shakir can be used in the flex or maybe wide receiver 3 spot or flex if you have 3 wide receiver spots, but it's been rough for the passing offense. Kincaid, he got unlucky last weekend. I mean, he gets kicked in the head on their touchdown drive, forced to miss the end of that one, doesn't come back until the drive where they have that super long touchdown by James Cook right away. So he's used a lot early on. Like, they were peppering with targets to that first drive, gets kicked in the head, comes back, and the game's over, right? Like, it was just over so early last week. And so kind of a weird 2 starts. There's no volume in week 1. And then when he comes back after being featured to start the drive, the game's already somehow over early on. So it's like, it's been a little bit weird. I do think Buffalo is going to get into some games this season where they let up some points, that they have to be aggressive on offense, that Kincaid doesn't leave the game with the concussion check, and that he does end up playing better, but he's definitely going to be less valuable than we were hoping for, as with 100% of tight ends this season, besides, I guess, Brock Bowers. Final game of the week is going to be Commanders at Bengals. This game has a 47-point total. Bengals 7.5-point home favorites. For the Commanders, the Bengals are a positive matchup for wide receivers, mostly neutral for all other positions. Given how this offense operates, Daniels is a weekly must start. Brian Robinson is a weekly running back 2. Terry McLaurin is an upside flex play. And then Austin Eckler is a running back 3. McLaurin hasn't hit yet, and he somehow only has 39 receiving yards despite 8 receptions, but a big game is coming. He still has a great first read percentage. He's still separating. His usage overall is still okay. Not what we'd want it to be, but it's still okay. This could be a spot where they need to finally kind of elevate their pass play rate. If the Bengals are going to find as much success on offense as I think they will, then Washington might have to be more aggressive, push the ball downfield. That's all good for McLaurin. Again, more of an upside flex play, but I have him 1 of 3 leagues. I'm going to keep rolling with him this week. One other play I want to mention is Zach Ertz. If you have Evan Ingram and you're like, I don't love this, right? They play on Monday night. I don't know if he's going to play. Hopefully we just kind of know by that point. But if that's a little bit risky for you, add Zach Ertz. He's available in most formats. And just then, wait until the Monday night game. If Ingram is active, play him instead of Ertz. If he's inactive, play Ertz in the game after. It's gross, but he's actually getting some okay usage this season. Then finally, for the Bengals, Commanders are just the dream matchup. We're going to talk about them every week. This is a big bounce back spot for this offense. Burrow, Chase, easy must starts. If Higgins is out again, I think Yosivas is a solid low-end flex player, maybe a wide receiver 3. It's also a get-right spot for the running backs. Moss is a running back 2, and I don't think you're starting him, but Chase Brown could bust off a long play as well. But really, you could be starting Moss as that running back 2. Would be great if we could get Higgins back this week because, again, really good spot for this passing attack. But I don't know yet. As of recording this, I don't believe he's practiced yet. Oh, and then Mike Gesicki. He's going to project well in a lot of formats, but the Commanders are a terrible defense except for one thing. They are the single most difficult matchup for tight ends. And given that I don't trust Mike Gesicki ever, I probably would not play him, even though he projects okay as like a low-end 1 to high-end tight end 2. I'm not in love with it. So please leave a like if you watch this far. Please subscribe if you are new to the channel. Both really help me out. Both take less than a second to do. Understand that these are the first look at all these rankings, and so I will be updating them as the week goes on. So check back to the website to see the most up-to-date projections. Again, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That'll do it for this one, though. Good luck to everyone this weekend, and I'll catch you all on the next one.